My father begged over the phone. Your brother's college fees are overdue. Please, just this time. I wired $11,500. A few days later, my cousin sent me a post. My brother at a casino, captioned, "Easy cash feels better." I kept quiet. That night, I took something they never expected. I swore I'd never send money again without a solid agreement. Back then, I still thought family ties meant something. The call came at 10:52 a.m. on a workday. Dad's name lit up my screen. He never called during office hours unless something was off, or more likely unless they needed something. I let it ring twice, exhaled, and picked up. He got straight to it. It was urgent. Brandon's tuition was unpaid. The university had sent final warnings. They'll kick him out, Monica. He's so close to finishing, one last semester. Just this once? I heard Mom in the background murmuring about how this could derail everything. Then he dropped the figure, 11,500. Not around 10, not about 11, but 11,500 exactly. Like they'd calculated it to sound just reasonable enough. Like I wouldn't notice how precise it was, how rehearsed they sounded. I sat in silence, staring at my desk's edge. My coffee was cold. I asked the usual questions. Didn't he have scholarships? Weren't they contributing? Wasn't there financial aid? Dad's tone tightened. Brandon missed some deadlines, couldn't apply this term, but he swore, and this was the clincher, he swore this would set him up for real, lasting success. I'd heard that promise before. It was Brandon's go-to move. Overpromise, underdeliver, then toss out some motivational nonsense he'd seen online. And every time my parents bought it completely. They'd used nearly the same words when they asked me to cover his car, his laptop, that 1-week networking trip to Miami. All of it educational. All of it critical, all of it for Brandon's future. But they always came to me. I sent the money that afternoon, not because I believed them, but because I didn't want to be the reason my brother crashed. Even though, deep down, I knew I was just propping up his failure. I didn't hear from him afterward. No thank you, no acknowledgement, not even a fake "you saved me" text. Then Sunday hit. I was prepping meals when my cousin Jenna messaged me. Just a screenshot. Brandon at a casino, not just there casually. He was reveling in it, dressed in some flashy shirt, clutching a champagne bottle, grinning with his arms around two girls I didn't recognize. The caption wasn't his. It was from his foolish friend Troy, who filmed everything. "Easy cash feels better." I stared at it until my chest tightened. Not just because of the money, though yes, 11,500 wasn't trivial. It was the whole thing. The layers of betrayal, the why, the manipulation, the disrespect, the scheme. Because this wasn't spontaneous. They'd planned it. He probably told them to wait until the funds cleared before booking the trip. My parents had to know. There's no way they didn't see this coming. That moment changed everything. All the years I told myself I was being a dutiful daughter, a supportive sister, the dependable one, it wasn't generosity. It was control. They never intended for Brandon to stand on his own. He didn't need to because I was the fallback, the hidden safety net. But that was over. I didn't reply to Jenna. I didn't text Brandon. I didn't call my parents. Instead, I started recalling, tallying every cent they'd taken, every excuse, every lie. I stopped thinking like their daughter and started thinking like someone who'd been wronged, and I knew where to begin. For 3 days, I said nothing to anyone. I went to work, replied to emails, hit the gym, acted normal. But inside, I was seething. I kept seeing that post in my head. Easy cash feels better. What stung most wasn't even Brandon. He was a lost cause. It was my parents. I realized they weren't duped by him. They were in on it. They didn't forget to tell me the truth. They deliberately hid it, backed him up. Why? Because they genuinely believed if I gave just a bit more, he'd eventually succeed and make it all right. They never questioned what succeeding looked like. They just trusted he'd figure it out someday. He was their project, and I was the bank keeping it afloat. I dug through old emails with Mom. Found one from a year ago where they pleaded for $2,000 for textbooks and housing. I'd been skeptical then, but sent it anyway. Now, looking at their history of requests, it felt like regular payments. Not aid, not crises, just routine withdrawals. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. They never saw me as a daughter, just a contingency plan. And Brandon, he knew how to play it. He'd always been charming, even as a kid escaping trouble with a grin and crocodile tears. Meanwhile, I was the steady one, the trustworthy one, translation, the one they could rely on and ignore. But they forgot I wasn't just dependable. I paid attention. And I remembered something they definitely didn't want me to. In January, Mom had boasted about a family heirloom she and Dad decided to store. A vintage jewelry set from her grandmother, supposedly worth about 20 grand. Her words, they kept it in a small lockbox in their bedroom closet. She made a big deal about how it was for Brandon's future wedding, the family's legacy. That's when it clicked. If they were okay with me losing thousands over fake tuition, they didn't deserve something I would have been trusted with if I'd been the favorite. It wasn't just about payback. It was about fairness. So I planned carefully, quietly. I drove to their house on Saturday, acting normal. I said I'd bring groceries, maybe help out. They suspected nothing. Mom even brewed coffee. Dad was outside tending to his prized lemon tree. Brandon wasn't there, perfect. I waited until Mom stepped into the laundry room, then went to their bedroom, pretending I was grabbing paper towels. The closet was unlocked. Bottom shelf, just as she'd said. I didn't take the whole box, I'm not reckless. I took 3 pieces from the set, enough to cause a stir later, but not enough for them to notice right away. Pieces that would spark arguments between them first. Let them doubt each other. Let the suspicion fester. I slipped them into a bag of old clothes I'd brought to donate. Then I smiled, said goodbye, and left. They wouldn't notice for days, maybe a week, but when they did, I'd be 3 moves ahead, and this was just the start. They noticed 5 days later. Mom sent a long, frantic text, no punctuation, trying to sound casual, asking if I'd seen the jewelry box, if I recalled whether she'd lent the bracelet to someone, maybe Aunt Lori. I didn't respond. I watched her typing dots appear, vanish, then reappear. She was unraveling. That night she called, left a voicemail saying they were spring cleaning and hoping nothing got misplaced during the last holiday. Then she asked if I'd borrowed anything from the box. Borrowed? That word made my teeth grind. I waited until morning to reply, letting her stew. Then I texted, I haven't been in your room in years. 1 line. No smileys, no hope you find it. No comfort. She didn't answer, but I knew her well enough to imagine the chaos at home. Dad getting defensive, Mom pointing fingers, Brandon probably dodging them or fake helping while secretly blaming them both. I pictured Dad checking the locks, then checking again. Mom listing everyone who'd been in the house. Asking neighbors if they saw anything odd, wondering if the cleaning lady took it, wondering if Brandon took it. That was the plan, confusion, mistrust. Let them turn on each other. But I wasn't finished. I'd had the pieces appraised quietly the day after taking them. A contact through a coworker, someone who handled vintage estate items, valued them higher than Mom's estimate, closer to $27,000 total for the 3 pieces, nearly 20 grand. The irony stung. They'd begged for $11,500, lied about tuition, funded Brandon's champagne-fueled weekend, and now I held something they thought was safely stashed. 3 days later, Brandon called. I let it go to voicemail, then he called again, and again. I finally answered to hear his spin. He sounded nervous, tried to play it cool, said there was a weird situation at home, Mom was losing it, Dad was talking about cameras. I just listened. Then he asked, half joking, if I'd seen or heard anything. I said, you think someone stole from you? He hesitated, then said, not me, but yeah, maybe, you never know these days. That was rich. He kept talking, probing, asking vague questions. Then he slipped in a comment that tied it all together. It's just weird timing, you know, right after the tuition thing makes you wonder. That was it. He was testing if I'd taken it. Not because he thought I would, but because in his twisted mind, it's what he'd do. So it made sense to him, and if they were already suspecting me, good. I wanted them to. For once, I wanted them to feel the weight of consequences, not just mop up Brandon's messes and call it love. I wanted them to sit in the chaos, question everything, and wonder how they raised a son who'd squander his sister's trust, and parents who enabled it. That week I slept better than I had in months, but it wasn't over. There was one final move to make, something to sever the last thread binding us. A week passed, and still no word from my parents. No calls, no subtle guilt trips disguised as checking in. Just silence, too much silence. I expected them to start circling by now, at least pretending to care about something beyond their precious jewelry. But nothing. Until Brandon sent a Venmo request. $75. No explanation, no context, just the amount and his name. I nearly laughed. Then I made the mistake of checking his Venmo history. I usually avoided it. Watching him spend unearned money was depressing. But that day I was curious. One payment stood out, to someone named Donnie, labeled for the footage. I clicked through. Donnie's profile was private, but his bio said enough. Event security installs, reviews, polls. That's when it hit me, they'd checked the house cameras. My stomach sank. Not because they'd catch me, I'd been careful. In and out through the garage, 4 minutes max, nowhere near the kitchen or front door. No fingerprints, no light switches. I'd even worn gloves, which felt excessive then, but now felt like genius. But then something worse hit me. I hadn't been alone that day. I remembered hearing a faint noise as I left, a thud, maybe a drawer shutting. I thought it was the dog or the wind. I hadn't checked, so I texted Jenna. She took ages to reply, then dropped a bombshell. Brandon's girlfriend was there that morning, stopping by to grab her charger. Why? I stared at the screen. I didn't even know Brandon had a girlfriend. I thought he was still into fleeting party girls. But no, this one had unannounced access, and the timing was too perfect. If she'd come through the front door while I was still there and they pulled that footage, they wouldn't see me, they'd see her. Brandon wouldn't suspect himself. He'd never doubt his Vegas buddy, but if the timeline looked off, he'd lose it. Which explained Jenna's next message, unprompted. Brandon thinks Selena might have taken something. He said something's missing and the timing's weird. He's trying not to scare her, but he's freaking out. This was better than I'd planned. I hadn't even thought of a scapegoat. I figured they'd blame me or each other, but no, they turned on her. I texted Brandon that night one line, ask your girlfriend what she saw. He replied instantly, then unsent it, then nothing. That said everything. The real chaos hit 2 days later when Jenna sent a screen recording from Facebook. A public post from Elena's profile. Imagine giving your all to someone who treats you like a criminal. Hope your mom finds her bracelet. I watched it 3 times. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a public jab. Brandon was unraveling, his perfect guy almost graduated image cracking, the family support system my parents built crumbling. Elena wasn't going quietly. Mom posted a Bible verse the next morning about restoring what's lost. I nearly choked on my coffee. Then Dad called, left a voicemail like he was reading lines, asking if I'd come to dinner soon so we could talk in person. I didn't reply. Instead, I made a call of my own, not to them, but to someone who'd been waiting for this moment, someone with her own reasons to tear it all down. Her name was Danielle, my cousin on Dad's side, the only one who saw through Brandon's golden boy act before I did. She was sharp, quick-witted, and so perceptive my parents called her difficult. They meant she didn't play their game of shielding Brandon at all costs. She hadn't spoken to the family in 5 years, not since they refused her a loan to cover debt her ex left her with. It wasn't much, a few thousand. She had proof, a repayment plan, even a notarized contract. But my parents said they couldn't get involved. Funny, a year later, they gave Brandon $6 grand for a second car because he was commuting to class. Danielle vanished after that. No big scene, no family blowout. She just cut contact, moved away, but not before warning me at a wedding in a quiet voice when no one was looking. They'll drain you if you let them. I didn't listen then, but I was now. I called her the night after Elena's post blew up the family group chat, accusing Brandon of treating her like a thief and mocking Mom about the jewelry. Danielle answered like she'd been waiting. Took you long enough? I spilled everything. The tuition lie, the wire transfer, the casino post, the jewelry, what I'd done. That I'd taken 3 pieces, had them appraised, not sold, just documented, protected. There was a pause. Then she said something that changed it all. You remember Aunt Carol's old files? Barely. Carol was her mom, long gone. Her stuff ended up in my parents' garage, dusty cabinets, moldy boxes, boring paperwork no one cared about. Most got moved to the attic. Danielle said she'd gone through them years ago and found something strange. Financial records, not Carol's, but our grandfather's. They showed a chunk of his life insurance payout disappearing after his death. Not used for funeral costs, not divided among siblings, but funneled into a failed business venture. Dad's venture. A name she recognized. I didn't know how to respond, but she did. I've got someone digging into it. It's not just the money, it's the intent. If he hid that payout from the family, we could reopen the estate. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a reckoning, the kind that needed lawyers and rattled bank tellers, the kind that made people sell assets to buy silence. I told her I was in. That week I had the jewelry pieces listed privately, not for sale but to establish value and create a paper trail. Appraisal receipts, chain of custody, timestamps, everything clean, everything traceable. I didn't want to sell them. I wanted them accounted for, just enough to make my parents question where they went and how they'd prove they ever existed. 3 days later, Brandon showed up. No text, no call, just knocked on my door, holding a grocery bag, wearing that fake concerned look he used when he wanted something. I didn't let him in. He said he just wanted to talk, that he didn't know who to trust, that Elena had lost it, was threatening to call the cops if he didn't clear her name, that Mom was crying nightly over something valuable and irreplaceable. I said nothing. Then came the moment I'd waited for. Did you take it? He meant the jewelry. I looked him in the eyes. What jewelry? He blinked like I'd hit him. He mumbled about cameras, timelines, how I was the only other person in the house that week. I let him ramble, then closed the door. He paced outside, arms folded, debating whether to knock again or leave. He left. Good, because Danielle had just sent a screenshot. An email from a paralegal confirming they'd requested access to the estate's old financial records, the ones in the attic, the ones my parents forgot they had. This time, they weren't just losing jewelry. They were losing their hold on the story they'd sold us for years. 10 days later, the panic set in. Not from my parents directly. They'd never admit things were collapsing until the pieces were already scattered. Instead, it came through Danielle. Late one night, she forwarded an email from the estate lawyer. We've received communication from Ronald M. expressing concern over the audit's scope and requesting a delay. Ronald M. was Dad. Delay meant he knew what they'd find. He probably remembered the exact moment he diverted that insurance payout to prop up some half-baked business idea in the mid-2000s. He thought no one would notice. The family wasn't exactly full of accountants. But someone noticed now. Danielle and I kept pushing. Every document we uncovered told the same story. Misused funds, shady transfers, verbal promises never recorded, all buried under layers of family loyalty and silence. And now the silence was breaking. Mom called at 9:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. She didn't mention Brandon, Elena, the jewelry, or the post that had set the family chat ablaze. Just this. We don't need to keep dragging this out. We're family. Let's talk. I stayed silent. She softened. Maybe we all messed up. Maybe. I asked which part. The tuition lie, using my money for Brandon's vacation, or covering it up and playing victim when it fell apart. She said she didn't want to argue. That was new. Arguing used to be her specialty. Dad called the next day. I didn't answer. His voicemail. Let's sit down and fix this. They were crumbling. I could sense it. Brandon went quiet online. No Vegas, no gym posts, no empty inspirational quotes. His profile went dark. Jenna said he'd moved back home temporarily after Elena dumped him and he couldn't pay rent. She also said my parents had been oddly withdrawn, skipping family events they used to host. That was the final shift. For once, they weren't rallying to save Brandon. They were trying to contain him. The jewelry's still with me, untouched. Beautiful, quietly insured under my own policy. Not for vengeance anymore, not even spite, just balance. Danielle and I met for lunch in late August, first time in years. She hugged me and said, "You seem lighter." I felt it. She said Mom had tried calling her too, same line. Let's talk, let's not drag this out. But we had nothing left to say. The truth was out, the money traced, the lies documented. They had no one left to lie to. My parents wanted peace, reconciliation, but they'd spent years teaching us to survive without their support. And we learned. So I let them sit in the silence they'd built. And this time I didn't feel guilty for walking away.